Captain stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the alien ships approach. His heart beat fast, but his face stayed calm. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. First contact with another intelligent species. The alien fleet was beautiful. 12 massive ships moved through space like silver whales swimming through dark water. Their hulls reflected the light from New Terra's sun, creating patterns that seemed almost magical. Had studied every report about these aliens, the Empire. They controlled 47 different species across hundreds of star systems. They were old, powerful, and wise. Or so everyone thought. "Sir, they're responding to our hail," said Lieutenant at the communications station. His young face showed excitement mixed with nervousness. Nodded, put it on screen. The change to show a tall alien creature. Its skin was dark blue with silver markings that moved like liquid metal. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern stared at without warmth. This was High Executor, leader of the diplomatic mission. "Humans," said. The translation software made his voice sound smooth but cold. "We have reviewed your claim to this region of space. It is. You will vacate these systems within 1 standard cycle." Felt confusion replace his excitement. "I don't understand. We've followed all the protocols outlined in your first contact guidelines. We've established only 3 colonies in uninhabited systems. We've made no aggressive moves. Your understanding is not required, only your compliance." 4 eyes seemed to examine like he was looking at an insect. "Your species is unauthorized. Your presence here disrupts established territorial agreements." "Agreements we weren't part of," said, keeping his voice steady. "Agreements made before we achieved faster-than-light travel. We're asking for a chance to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution." "There is nothing to negotiate. Leave or be removed." The screen went dark. Stared at the blank for a long moment. Behind him, the bridge crew sat in shocked silence. 3 years of preparation for first contact, and it had lasted less than 2 minutes. "Sir," said quietly, "what do we do?" "Contact Earth, send them everything. Then," paused, "then we contact New Terra and tell them to prepare for evacuation." Down on New Terra's surface, Park was teaching a class of children about Earth's oceans when the emergency alert sounded. The children looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. She was Sister, though she hadn't seen him in person for 2 years. She'd come to New Terra as a marine biologist, excited to study the alien ocean that covered 60% of the planet. "It's okay," she told the children, even though her hands were shaking. "Let's go to the shelter, just like we practiced." But it wasn't okay. Through the classroom windows, she could see the sky changing. The silver ships were descending through the atmosphere, dozens of them now. They hung in the air above the colony city like huge metal storm clouds. Got the children to the underground shelter and then ran to the communications center. She had to find out what was happening, had to know if it was safe. The communications center was chaos. People shouted into microphones, trying to reach the horizon, trying to reach Earth, trying to understand why the aliens were surrounding their city. Pushed through the crowd and found Director Minu at the main console. "What's happening?" she asked. Minu's face was gray. "They're not answering our calls. They're just positioning themselves around every settlement on the planet. Military targets, civilian centers, farms, everything." "But why? We haven't done anything." "I don't think they care." That's when the sky started burning. The ships opened fire without warning. Beams of purple energy lanced down from the sky, striking buildings and turning them into clouds of dust and fire. The ground shook. The walls of the communications center cracked. People screamed. Grabbed the nearest microphone. She didn't know if anyone was listening, but she had to try. "This is New Terra. We're under attack. They are firing on civilian targets. They're killing everyone. Please, someone help us." The building shook again. Part of the ceiling collapsed. Minu grabbed her arm. "We have to go." but knew there was nowhere to go. Through the broken windows, she could see the entire city burning. Ships were falling from orbit, broken and tumbling. Those must be the human ships, the transport vessels that were supposed to evacuate people. They were destroying everything. She thought about, was he still alive up there? She hoped he was. She hoped he would make it back to Earth. She hoped someone would survive to tell the story of what happened here. "Tell Earth," she said into the microphone, not caring if anyone heard. "Tell them we were peaceful. Tell them they did this without cause. Tell Earth to remember us." The last thing she saw was a purple beam of light filling the window. In orbit, watched his sister's world die. The horizon had been crippled in the first attack. Life support was failing. Weapons were offline. All he could do was watch the screens and record everything. Lee, a young engineer, crawled across the damaged bridge toward him. Blood ran down the side of his face from a cut on his forehead. "Sir, I can get the escape pods working. Not all of them, but maybe 5 or 6. How many crew do we have left alive?" 23, sir." Looked at the screens showing New Terra. The colony was almost gone, 2,300,000 people. He'd seen the population numbers every day. Now those numbers meant corpses, burned homes, destroyed dreams. "Get as many people into the pods as you can," said. His voice sounded strange in his own ears, hollow and distant. "Make sure the black box recorder goes with you. Everything we've recorded, every second of this massacre, it has to get back to Earth." "What about you, sir?" "I'm staying. Someone needs to keep recording until the end. Someone needs to witness." Wanted to argue, could see it in his eyes, but there wasn't time. The young engineer nodded and started gathering survivors. Sat in his captain's chair and watched the alien ships methodically destroy every human presence in the system. They were thorough, efficient, cold. They didn't leave anyone alive on purpose. They just didn't care enough to make sure. When the escape pods launched, the ships didn't even bother chasing them. Why would they? A few survivors fleeing in broken pods posed no threat. They had made their point. They had erased humanity's first attempt to reach the stars. As the horizon's power finally failed and the screens went dark, spoke his last words into the ship's log. "This is Captain of the UES Horizon. Today the Empire murdered 2.3 million human beings without cause or warning. They have declared us unauthorized to exist. They have tried to erase us." He paused and his voice hardened. "They have made a mistake. Humanity will remember this. We will remember every name, every face, every life they took. And one day we will make them answer for what they did here. I won't live to see it, but it will happen. Humanity never forgets." The recording ended. The ship died. And in the darkness of space, the last sparks of New Terra's destruction faded away. But Earth was listening. Earth heard everything, and Earth would remember. 5 years had passed since the burning of New Terra. The galaxy had almost forgotten about humanity. The Empire reported that the unauthorized species had either died out or submitted to isolation. The other species in the galaxy accepted this story. After all, they were powerful. No one questioned them. But they were wrong about one thing. Humanity hadn't died. Humanity had been planning. Han sat in a dark room deep beneath the surface of Mars and studied the holographic display floating in front of her. She was 49 years old now, but she'd spent more than half her life doing one job, learning everything about the Empire, understanding how they thought, how they acted, how they controlled their territory. She was the director of human intelligence, though most people just called her the spy master. It wasn't a pleasant title, but it was accurate. She'd built a network of agents across space, hidden people who looked like other species, acted like other species, but worked for humanity. "Report from Agent Bora," said her assistant, walking into the room. "They have agreed to help us when the time comes." Nodded slowly. They were one of the 47 species under control. They'd been conquered 200 years ago, and they'd never stopped hatting their masters. Had spent 3 years earning their trust, showing them the recordings of New Terra, proving that humanity understood what it meant to be attacked without reason. "How many species are with us now?" asked. 19 confirmed. 8 more are considering. The rest are too afraid or too loyal to the 19 is enough. Close the holographic display. Tell them to prepare, it won't be long now. Far above Mars, in the shipyards hidden beyond Neptune's orbit, Admiral walked through the hangar bay of the HNS Retribution. He was 68 years old. His hair was completely white. His back hurt most days, but his mind was sharp and his memory was perfect. He remembered the day the news came about New Terra. He'd been a young captain then, commanding a patrol ship near Jupiter. He remembered watching the recordings that Lee had brought back in the escape pod. He remembered seeing Captain's final message. That day had made a promise. He would build a fleet that could destroy the Empire. He would give humanity the tools for revenge. And now, after 35 years, that fleet was ready. "Beautiful, isn't she?" said a voice behind him. Turned to see Song, the chief weapons engineer. Was younger than only 52, but he looked older. He'd spent 3 decades working 18-hour days, designing weapons systems that didn't exist in any database, creating technology that would surprise the... "How many ships are combat ready?" asked. 412, said. "All equipped with the new quantum disruptors and swarm missile systems, all running silent stealth drives. They won't see us coming until we're right on top of them." Looked at the massive warship in front of him. It was smaller than ships, but that was the point. Humanity had learned from every mistake. They'd studied every battle record they could find. They'd learned to be fast, smart, and deadly. "When do we launch?" asked. "Soon, very soon." In another part of the hidden shipyards, Sora sat in a simulator running combat scenarios. She was 28 years old, one of the youngest tactical officers in the fleet. She'd been born 3 years after New Terra burned. She'd grown up learning about the massacre like other children learned about history. But for her, it wasn't history. It was the reason for everything. The simulation showed a battle group, 12 heavy cruisers protecting a command ship, standard defensive formation. Sora studied the energy patterns on her display, looking for the flaw she knew was there. There, the shield generators cycled every 37 seconds, creating a microgap in their coverage. It lasted less than 1/10 of a second, but that was enough. A fast missile could get through. A precise hit could disable an entire ship. She discovered this weakness 6 months ago. Since then, every human weapon had been redesigned to exploit it. The thought their shields made them untouchable. They were about to learn otherwise. "Another perfect run," said her instructor commander, watching from the observation deck. "You've run this scenario 200 times. You could do it with your eyes closed." "I need to do it 200 more times," Sora said without looking up from her display. "When the real fight starts, I can't make mistakes. People are depending on me." Smiled sadly. She was one of the survivors from New Terra. She'd been 17 when they attacked, serving as a junior technician on a transport ship. She'd watched her parents die in the orbital bombardment. She understood why Sora pushed herself so hard. "The Admiral wants to see you," said. "Something about a special assignment." Sora left the simulator and made her way through the shipyard corridors. Everywhere she looked, she saw human military personnel working with quiet determination. No one joked. No one laughed. They all knew what was coming. They all knew this was the moment their entire civilization had been preparing for. Admiral was in his office studying a star chart. When Sora entered, he gestured for her to sit. "You found the shield flaw," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, sir. Because of you, we've redesigned our entire attack strategy. You've given us an advantage that don't know we have." Leaned back in his chair. "How would you like to use that advantage yourself? I'm offering you a ship, the HNS Vengeance. Stealth frigate, latest technology, best crew in the fleet." Sora felt her breath catch. her own command, at 28, it was almost unheard of. "I won't lie to you," continued. "It's a dangerous assignment. You'll be leading the first strike against Prime's orbital defenses. If you fail, the entire operation might fall apart. If you succeed, you'll open the door for the rest of the fleet." "I'll do it," Sora said without hesitation. "I thought you might," smiled for the first time in the meeting. "Your father would be proud. He was a good man, Captain." Sora's eyes widened. "You knew my father." "He was my friend. We went through the academy together. I was there when you were born." Smile faded. "I was also there when I heard about New Terra. I made a promise that day, Sora. I promised I would make sure his death meant something. That's what this fleet is. That's what this mission is. A promise kept." Across the solar system, in a facility on Earth's moon, Lee stood in front of a classroom full of officers. He was 53 years old now, but he still had nightmares about the escape pod, about watching New Terra burn through the tiny window, about being one of 847 people who survived out of 2,300,000. But he'd turned that nightmare into purpose. He'd become humanity's expert on culture, psychology, and military doctrine. He'd spent 35 years studying the enemy. He knew how they thought. He knew how they would react. He knew their strengths and their weaknesses. "They believe they are superior," he told the class. "They've believed it for so long that it's become a blind spot. They think humans are primitives. They think we'll fight like primitives, charge forward, make emotional decisions, act without thinking." He brought up a holographic display showing battle formations. "They're wrong. We're going to fight smart. We're going to hit them where they're weak. We're going to use tactics they've never seen before. And when they try to adapt, we'll be 3 steps ahead of them." One of the officers raised a hand. "Sir, what if they surrender quickly? What if they ask for peace?" His face became hard. "Then we'll listen, but we won't forget. The terms will be complete disarmament, war crimes trials, reparations that will last for generations. They wanted to erase us. Instead, we're going to show them that humanity remembers everything." In the command center beneath Mars, Han received the final message she'd been waiting for. The transmission was encrypted, bounced through 17 relay stations and disguised as normal stellar noise, but she could read it clearly. "All pieces in position, assets ready for activation, awaiting final orders." She typed a response, 3 words that would change the galaxy. "Execute Operation Reckoning." Admiral gave the order from the bridge of the Retribution. 412 human warships activated their drives and began moving. They'd been practicing in secret for years. Every captain knew their target. Every crew knew their job. Every weapon was ready. The ships split into 12 groups and entered faster than light travel. They didn't all go to the same place. They went to 12 different colonies, all at the same time. The attacks would be coordinated, precise, and devastating. Humanity had spent 35 years preparing for this moment. 35 years building ships, training soldiers, gathering intelligence, and making allies. 35 years of silence while they thought they were forgotten. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity never forgot. And the Empire was about to learn what it meant to wound a species that thought in terms of generations, not years. A species that would spend decades preparing revenge. A species that treated justice as an obligation, not an option. The war was beginning, and this time humanity would not be the victim. The colony of Station never saw the attack coming. One moment their sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 12 human warships appeared from nowhere, their weapons already firing. Captain stood on the bridge of the HNS Vengeance and watched his missiles streak toward the orbital defense platforms. The shields activated, the familiar purple glow spreading across their stations, but had studied those shields. He knew their secret. "Timing sequence active," said his weapons officer, waiting for the cycle gap. 37 seconds. That's how long it took for shields to complete one full cycle, and for 0.09 seconds during that cycle, there was a gap, a tiny window that they didn't even know existed. Now said calmly. The missiles adjusted their course by microseconds and slipped through the gap. They struck the defense platforms before the operators even realized their shields had failed. Explosions bloomed in the darkness of space, turning sophisticated military equipment into expanding clouds of debris. "Station is gone," reported the tactical officer. "No survivors, moving to secondary targets." Across the system, the same scene played out at 11 other colonies. Human ships appeared without warning. Defenses activated too late. Ancient shield technology that had protected the Empire for centuries suddenly became useless against weapons designed by humans who'd spent 3 decades studying every weakness. But the humans weren't targeting civilians. Every strike hit military bases, government buildings, and communication stations. The orders from Admiral had been clear: destroy their ability to fight back, but avoid civilian casualties when possible. Humanity would not become monsters to fight monsters. On Prime, the Empire's home world, High Executor sat in his command chamber and watched the reports flood in. 12 colonies under attack, defense systems failing, communication networks going dark, and the attackers were humans, the species he'd erased 35 years ago. "This is impossible," said. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of stress in biology. The humans had no fleet, no technology, no ability to threaten us. His military advisor, Commander, brought up holographic displays showing the human ships. "They've been building in secret. Our intelligence completely missed it. These ships use stealth technology we've never encountered. Their weapons exploit a flaw in our shield generators that we didn't know existed." How many ships? At least 400, possibly more. Felt something he hadn't experienced in his long life. Fear. Real, genuine fear. He dismissed humanity as primitives. He'd thought destroying New Terra would end the human problem. Instead, he'd created an enemy that had spent decades preparing for revenge. "Send the message to all forces," ordered. "Full mobilization, recall all ships. We end this quickly before it spreads." But then the human broadcast began. Every screen in space suddenly showed the same thing: the burning of New Terra, the orbital bombardment, the civilian cities being destroyed, the transport ships being shot down. And then, one by one, the faces appeared. 2,300,000 faces, every person who died that day. Names scrolled across the screen in human writing and translation. Ages, occupations, families, each victim given individual recognition. The broadcast lasted for hours, forcing the entire Empire to witness what had been done. And then came the voice of Admiral. 35 years ago, the Empire murdered every human on New Terra without warning or cause. They declared us unauthorized to exist. They tried to erase us from the galaxy. The old Admiral's voice was calm but filled with iron. "They failed. Humanity remembers. We remember every name, every face, every life you took. Today we begin our response, not through genocide but through justice. Surrender your military forces. Submit to war crimes tribunals. Pay reparations to the families of the dead, or face complete military defeat. This is not a negotiation. This is not a threat. This is a promise. You have 48 hours to decide." The broadcast ended. Silence fell across the Empire. Nam commanded a carrier group on the edge of space. Her mission was different from the attack groups. She didn't target colonies or military bases. She targeted the faster-than-light communication network that held the Empire together. "Target the relay station at coordinates 77 Mark III, she ordered. Her ships fired quantum disruptors, weapons that Song had designed specifically to destroy subspace communication systems. The relay station exploded silently, cutting off instant communication between dozens of worlds. "Next target," said. One by one, her group destroyed relay stations across 100 light-years. The Empire was being broken into isolated pieces, unable to coordinate, unable to call for help. It was psychological warfare as much as military strategy. Make them feel alone. Make them understand that their vast empire couldn't protect them. Back on Mars, Han activated her network of sleeper agents. For 35 years, these humans had lived as members of other species. They'd used genetic modification, surgical alteration, and advanced disguises to blend in with subject races. Now it was time for them to reveal themselves. Agent, who had lived for 15 years as a merchant, stood in the central square of home world and began broadcasting. People of the nation, I am human. For years I've lived among you, learning about you, understanding your pain under rule. Today humanity offers you freedom. Join us in rebellion and we will help you throw off your chains. Stay loyal to the and we will leave you in peace. But know this, the empire that enslaved you is falling. The choice is yours. Similar broadcasts happened on 19 different worlds. Species that had suffered under control for decades or centuries suddenly saw hope. The humans weren't just attacking they were offering liberation. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral watched the tactical displays as the situation developed. Everything was going according to plan. Better than planned, actually. They were confused, disorganized, and responding exactly as Lee had predicted they would. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Prime," said the communication officer. "High Executor wants to negotiate." "After 48 hours?" asked. "It's only been 6 hours, sir." Smiled grimly. 6 hours. The mighty empire, which had stood for thousands of years, was ready to negotiate after 6 hours of human attacks. It showed how completely they'd been caught off guard. "Put him on screen," said. Appeared and could see the fear in those 4 alien eyes. The High Executor who had ordered the destruction of New Terra now looked like a cornered animal. "Admiral," said, trying to sound dignified, "this attack is rash and unnecessary. We can discuss terms." "No," interrupted. "You had your chance to discuss terms 35 years ago. You chose to burn our colony instead. Now you get to experience what it feels like when a stronger force decides you don't deserve to exist." "We're willing to recognize human territorial claims," said quickly. "We'll withdraw from your space. We'll pay compensation." "You'll do exactly what I told you to do. Full surrender. War crimes trials. Reparations that will last for generations. Or we'll continue this attack until your empire is dust." "You can't defeat us. We have 3,000 warships, 47 member species. You're one species with a few hundred ships." "Then why are you calling me after 6 hours?" asked quietly. "Why aren't you mobilizing that massive fleet? Why aren't your 47 species rushing to your defense?" Had no answer. "I'll tell you why," continued. "Because 19 of those species are already in rebellion, because your communication network is in pieces, because your shields don't work against our weapons, because you spent 35 years thinking humanity was gone while we spent 35 years preparing to destroy you. You made a mistake. You hurt us, but you didn't kill us. Now you pay the price." The transmission ended. Lee sat in his office and received reports from across the war zone. Everything was happening as he'd predicted. They were pulling their fleets back to protect their core worlds. The subject species were rising up. The empire was fracturing from within and under assault from without. But there was still the big battle to come. Would gather his fleet at Nexus Point, the strategic system that controlled access to Prime. 3,000 warships against 400 human ships. The numbers weren't good. But numbers weren't everything. Had spent 35 years studying military tactics. He knew how they thought. He knew how they would position their fleet. He knew what mistakes they would make. And he'd shared all of that knowledge with Admiral. Sora sat in the captain's chair of the Vengeance and reviewed the next phase of the operation. Her ship had performed perfectly in the first strikes. Now came the hard part, that would be ready for them at Nexus Point. They'd be angry, scared, and desperate. Desperate enemies were dangerous enemies. "How are you feeling, Captain?" asked Commander, her first officer. "Scared," Sora admitted, "but ready. My father didn't get to fight back when they attacked New Terra. I'm fighting for him, for all of them." "Your crew is with you," said. "Every one of us knows what's at stake." Sora nodded. In 48 hours, the human fleet would face the full might of the Empire at Nexus Point. It would be the largest space battle in galactic history, and humanity was outnumbered 4-1. But humanity had spent 35 years preparing for this moment. They had better weapons, better tactics, better intelligence, and most importantly, they had something they didn't have. They had a reason to win. The galaxy was about to learn that revenge, when properly planned and patiently executed, could break empires. And humanity was very, very good at being patient. The Nexus Point system looked like a gathering storm. 3,000 warships filled the space around the massive stargate that connected to Prime. High Executor had called every available ship, pulled forces from a dozen sectors, abandoned garrison duties to build this fleet. It was the largest military force the Empire had assembled in 2 centuries. Admiral watched the enemy formation from the bridge of the Retribution. His 412 ships looked small compared to the Armada. The numbers said this should be a massacre, but numbers didn't account for preparation, intelligence, or pure human stubbornness. Said quietly into his communication link, "Tell me I'm not leading my people into a death trap." Across the fleet, in his intelligence ship, Lee studied the formation on his displays. He'd been analyzing military doctrine for 35 years. He knew their tactics better than they knew them themselves. "They've positioned their command ships in the center of the formation," reported. "They think it's the safest position, surrounded by layers of defensive ships, but it's also the most predictable. They'll fight defensively, trying to use their numbers to create a kill zone. They expect us to charge forward like barbarians." "And we're not going to do that," said with a slight smile. "No, sir, we're going to do what humans do best. We're going to cheat." The human fleet split into multiple groups, each moving in different directions. It looked chaotic, like they had no coordination. The commanders saw this and felt confident. The humans were panicking, breaking formation before the battle even started. But it was all part of the plan. Captain led his squadron on what looked like a suicidal charge toward the left flank. 50 human ships against 500 vessels. The enemy opened fire, purple energy beams filling the space between the fleets. But ships were faster than the expected. They dodged, weaved, and used their superior maneuverability to avoid most of the incoming fire. And when they fired back, they aimed for specific points on the shields, timing their shots to exploit the cycle gap. "Target their sensor arrays," ordered. "Don't try to destroy the ships, just blind them." His squadron's missiles weren't designed to kill. They were designed to confuse. They exploded near ships, releasing clouds of metallic particles that scattered sensor readings. Suddenly, the left flank couldn't see clearly. Their targeting systems went haywire. Their coordination fell apart. And that's when Nam's carrier group struck from above. Her ships had been hiding in the system's asteroid field, running silent, waiting for the perfect moment. When the left flank went blind, she launched her attack. 200 fighter craft swarmed out of her carriers, small and fast, impossible for the confused ships to track effectively. "Focus on their command vessels," ordered. "Take out their ability to coordinate." The fighters dove into the formation like sharks into a school of fish. They didn't try to destroy the big warships. Instead, they targeted communication arrays, command bridges, and coordination systems. The ships were still functional, but they couldn't talk to each other, couldn't coordinate their defenses, couldn't work as a unified fleet. On the flagship, High Executor watched his carefully organized battle plan fall apart. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy he'd ever faced. They weren't trying to win through strength. They were trying to win through chaos. "Get me control of the fleet," shouted at his communication officers. "I need to give orders. The humans are jamming our signals. High Executor. We can only reach ships within direct visual range." Felt panic rising. He had 3,000 ships, but he could only command a few hundred at a time. The rest were fighting independently, making their own decisions, getting in each other's way. Lee watched the battle unfold exactly as he'd predicted. "Admiral, the center is starting to move forward. They're trying to protect their flanks." "Perfect," said. "Sara, you're up. Show them what the Vengeance can do." Captain Sara had been waiting for this moment. Her ship and 9 others had been circling around the battle, unnoticed in all the chaos. Now they moved toward the Nexus Star Gate itself, the massive structure that was the whole reason for this battle. "Target the gate's defensive platforms," Sara ordered. "We need to take control of that gate." The Vengeance and its squadron opened fire. The platforms exploded one by one. Within minutes, Sara's ships controlled the gate, cutting off this escape route to their home world. "Gate secured," Sara reported to Admiral. "They can't retreat and they can't call for reinforcements." Saw his strategic situation collapse completely. His fleet was scattered, confused, and now trapped. The humans had done the impossible. 400 ships had outmaneuvered 3,000. "All ships emergency retreat," ordered through what remained of his communication network. "Fall back to—" The transmission ended abruptly. Squadron had found the flagship. They'd identified it by tracking which ship was sending the most signals, and now they were making their attack run. "This is for New Terra," said softly. His ship accelerated to relativistic speed, pushing its engines beyond safe limits. The flagship's shields activated, but shields meant nothing against a ship moving at near-light velocity. The physics were simple and brutal. Ship struck the flagship like a hammer hitting glass. The impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. Both ships ceased to exist, transforming into an expanding sphere of superheated plasma. High Executor died instantly, along with 3,000 crew members. The being who had ordered the destruction of New Terra never felt the moment of his death. Across the battle space, ships saw their High Executor die, saw their command structure collapse, saw themselves trapped with no leadership, no coordination, and no hope of victory. Ships began surrendering. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. White surrender signals appeared across the fleet as captains made the only rational choice left to them. Admiral accepted the surrenders but kept his weapons ready. Trust had to be earned, and they had destroyed all trust 35 years ago. "Cease fire," ordered his fleet. "Secure the surrendered vessels. Begin recovery operations for escape pods and survivors." On the intelligence ship, Han received reports from across the galaxy. The rebellion she'd been planning for years was in full swing. They had seized control of their home world. They had destroyed their garrison. They had declared independence and offered to join humanity's cause. 19 species that had been enslaved by the Empire were now free, and they all knew who had made that freedom possible. Said her assistant, "We're receiving surrender offers from 12 sector governors. They're asking for protection from the rebellions. Tell them we'll consider their requests after they hand over everyone responsible for the New Terra massacre. We want names. We want evidence. We want justice." The Empire was falling apart, not destroyed completely, but broken beyond repair. The 47 species that had been forced into unity under rule were now making their own choices. Some chose independence. Some chose to stay together without leadership. Some asked to join humanity's growing coalition. Lee compiled his final battle report. The Battle of Nexus Point had lasted 6 hours. Humanity had lost 43 ships and 17,000 personnel. They had lost their high executor, their flagship, 400 warships, and any remaining claim to galactic dominance. But the war wasn't over. There were still military forces scattered across hundreds of systems, still loyalist species that hadn't joined the rebellion, still fanatics who would rather fight to the death than accept defeat. It would take 7 more years to completely end the conflict. 7 years of smaller battles, diplomatic negotiations, and careful rebuilding. But the turning point had been Nexus Point, the moment when humanity proved that intelligence, preparation, and patience could defeat superior numbers. Captain Sora stood on the bridge of the Vengeance and looked at the star gate she'd captured. Her father had died without fighting back, but she'd fought. She'd helped win a battle that would change galactic history. "Captain," said Commander, "Admiral is asking all ship commanders to report to the Retribution. He wants to thank us personally." Sora nodded, but she didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired, tired and sad. Victory didn't bring back the dead. It didn't undo 35 years of pain. It just meant the pain had a purpose now. Admiral gathered his commanders in the Retribution's main briefing room. These men and women had trained for decades for this moment. They'd sacrificed normal lives, normal families, normal peace to prepare for war. "We've won the big battle," told them. "But now comes the harder part, building peace, making sure this never happens again, creating a galaxy where no species has the power to erase another species just because they can." He looked around the room at the faces of humanity's best and, "We didn't do this for revenge alone," continued. "We did this to show the galaxy that actions have consequences, that cruelty will be answered, that the strong cannot prey on the weak without eventually facing justice. In the years to come, people will remember this war. They'll remember that humanity refused to be erased, that we came back stronger, that we made the answer for their crime. Let's make sure they also remember that we built something better from the ashes." The commanders stood and saluted. Not a military salute, but something more personal. A gesture of respect between people who had shared an impossible burden and carried it together. The Empire was broken, but humanity's work was just beginning. 7 years had passed since the Battle of Nexus Point. The war was over. The Empire no longer existed. In its place, 47 species now governed themselves through the Galactic Concord, a democratic council where every voice had equal weight. Lee stood at the edge of New Terra's memorial station and looked out at the ruins below. The planet was still from the bombardment. Forests that had burned were only beginning to grow back. Cities remained as broken skeletons of metal and stone, but life was returning. Plants that had survived in the deep oceans were spreading. Small animals were reclaiming the land. Nature was healing, even if it would take centuries for the planet to fully recover. He was 70 years old now. His hair was completely white. His hands shook slightly when he held things, but he came here every year on the anniversary of the massacre to remember. The memorial station itself was a work of art and engineering. 2,300,000 names carved into quantum-locked crystal that would last until the universe ended. Each name could be touched, and touching it would bring up holographic images of that person, their face, their voice, their story. The dead of New Terra would never be forgotten. Placed his hand on one name, Park, the marine biologist who had tried to save children in those final moments, the woman who had sent the last message from New Terra, Sister. Her hologram appeared, smiling, alive in memory if not in reality. She'd been 32 when she died, was now 70. He'd lived more than twice as long as she had. It didn't feel fair. "We did it," he told her hologram quietly. "We made them pay. We built something better. I hope that means something." The hologram smiled but didn't answer. It was just a recording, not a ghost, but liked to think she would have approved. Behind him, footsteps approached. He turned to see a young female, maybe 20 years old by their aging standards. She wore simple clothes and looked nervous. "Excuse me," she said in careful human language. "Are you Lee?" "I am. I study human history at the Academy on Prime. I wanted to ask you something if it's not disrespectful." Gestured for her to continue. "Will humans ever forgive us for what my people did?" It was a question had been asked many times over the past 7 years. Young who hadn't been born yet when New Terra burned, who felt guilt for crimes they didn't commit, who wanted absolution for their ancestors' actions. "Forgiveness is complicated," said slowly. "Your empire killed 2,300,000 innocent people, destroyed humanity's first attempt to reach the stars, did it without warning or reason. That's not something that can be erased with an apology." His face fell. She started to turn away, but continued, making her stop. "Forgiveness and coexistence are different things. We don't forgive what was done. We'll never forget it. But we're willing to work with your generation to build something better. You didn't burn our world. You weren't responsible. You get to choose what kind of person you want to be." "That's what my teacher says too," said. "She says remembering the past is important so we don't repeat it." "Your teacher is wise." After the young left, walked through the memorial reading names. So many names. Each one a life cut short. Each one a story that ended too soon. On Earth, Admiral lay in a hospital bed. He was 75 years old and his body was failing. The doctors said he had weeks left, maybe days, but he'd lived long enough to see the mission completed. That was all he'd wanted. His former officers came to visit him. Captain Sora, now an admiral herself and commander of the conquered peacekeeping fleet. Nam, who had become humanity's ambassador to the people. Song, still designing weapons but hoping they'd never need to be used. "We did good work," told them weakly. "Changed the galaxy, made sure what happened to New Terra won't happen again." "You changed the galaxy, sir," Sora said. "We just followed your orders." "No," shook his head. "I gave the orders, but you all had to have faith that the plan would work. Faith that 35 years of preparation would be enough. Faith that justice was possible. That's harder than following orders." He looked at each of them. "Promise me something. Promise you'll remember why we fought. Not for revenge, not for conquest, for justice. For the principle that the strong can't erase the weak. Keep that promise alive." They all promised. Admiral died 3 days later, surrounded by people he'd led through the impossible. His funeral was attended by representatives from 47 species. Even the sent delegates, young ones who understood the importance of honoring the man who had defeated their empire but shown mercy to their people. Han was 64 now and serving as Ambassador General to the Galactic Concord. She spent her days mediating disputes between species, negotiating trade agreements and preventing conflicts before they started. It was exhausting work, but important. She'd built a spy network to destroy an empire. Now she used those same skills to build trust between former enemies. One day, she received a message from a representative. They had been enslaved by the for 200 years. They'd been among the first to join the rebellion. "Ambassador Han," the message said, "our people want to build a monument to humanity, to honor those who freed us. We'd like your input on the design." Thought about it carefully before responding. "Don't build a monument to humanity," she wrote back. "Build a monument to freedom itself, to the principle that every species deserves to govern themselves, to the idea that slavery is always wrong. That's what we fought for. That's what should be remembered." They built their monument. It showed 47 different species standing in a circle, equal and free. At the center was an empty space representing all those who had died fighting for freedom, from New Terra and a dozen other worlds. Captain had died at Nexus Point, but his sacrifice became legendary. The Ghost of Nexus, they called him. The human who had killed the High Executor through sheer courage and determination. Statues of his final attack run were built on 3 different worlds, not as a celebration of violence, but as a reminder that sometimes protecting others required ultimate sacrifice. On Mars, the Human Academy of Strategic Studies was established. It taught officers from all conquered species how to defend themselves without becoming aggressors, how to prepare for war while working for peace, how to remember history without being trapped by it. The Academy's motto was simple: remember, learn, build. Sora stood in front of a class of cadets, both human and alien, teaching them about the Battle of Nexus Point. She was 57 years old now. Her hair had gray streaks. She'd commanded the peacekeeping fleet for 15 years without having to fire a shot in anger. That felt like real victory. They made a mistake, she told her students. They thought that because they were stronger, they could do whatever they wanted. They thought humanity would either die or submit. They didn't understand that some species refuse to accept injustice, even when accepting it would be easier. A young human cadet raised his hand. "Admiral, do you think we'll ever have to fight another war like that?" "I hope not," Sora said honestly. "But I can't promise we won't. That's why you're here, to be ready if the worst happens, to be strong enough that others think twice before attacking, and to be wise enough to know when fighting isn't the answer." She looked around the classroom at the different species sitting together. "My father died on New Terra before he could fight back. I fought so his death would have meaning. You study so that, hopefully, your generation won't have to fight at all. That's progress. That's what we've been building toward." At New Terra's memorial, Lee stood once more before the wall of names. It was his last visit. His health was failing and he knew he wouldn't make it back next year. That was okay. He'd lived long enough, longer than most survivors, longer than he'd expected when he escaped in that damaged pod 70 years ago. A group of children approached, a mix of human and alien species, led by their teacher. They were on a school trip to learn about galactic history. One small human girl looked up at the wall of names with wide eyes. "Are these all real people?" "Yes," said gently. "Every single one. 2,300,000 people who died here." "Why did they die?" "Because another species decided humans didn't have the right to exist. Because they were strong and we were weak, and they thought that meant they could do whatever they wanted." The girl thought about this seriously. "But you won, you beat them." "Yes, we won, but winning didn't bring these people back. That's why you're learning about this. So you understand that violence has real costs, real consequences, so you'll think carefully before you ever support a war." The teacher, a woman named, nodded gratefully. "That's exactly the lesson. Thank you, Mr. Lee." As the children moved on, turned back to the memorial, he placed his hand on the wall one last time, touching as many names as he could reach. "We kept our promise," he whispered. "We made them remember, we made them pay, we built something better. You didn't die for nothing." Lee died peacefully 6 months later. He was laid to rest on New Terra, near the memorial, joining the people he'd spent his life honoring. The galaxy had learned its lesson. 47 species now worked together, protecting each other, respecting each other. They'd formed the Galactic Concord not because they loved each other, but because they'd seen what happened when the strong preyed on the weak without consequences. Humanity's reputation spread across the stars. They were the species that refused to be erased, the species that thought in terms of generations, the species that would spend decades preparing justice, the species that remembered everything. New species joining the galactic community were always told the story of New Terra, how they tried to erase humanity, how humanity spent 35 years preparing revenge, how a smaller force defeated a larger empire through intelligence, patience, and absolute determination. And they were told the most important part of the story: humanity could have exterminated could have done to them what was done to New Terra, but they chose accountability over genocide, justice over revenge. They destroyed an empire but preserved a species. That became humanity's legacy, not as conquerors, not as saints, but as a species that refused to forget wounds, that pursued justice across generations, and that understood the difference between revenge and accountability. The saying spread across 1,000 worlds: never wound humanity unless you can destroy them completely, because they will remember, they will adapt, they will prepare, and they will never stop coming. But they will also never become the monsters they fight. They will make you answer for your crimes, but they will not commit crimes to do it. At New Terra's memorial, the quantum-locked crystals preserved 2,300,000 names. They would last for trillions of years, long after humanity itself might be gone. A permanent reminder that every life matters, that injustice will be remembered, that the dead deserve more than to be forgotten. And in the Galactic Concord's main assembly hall, a simple plaque hung on the wall. In memory of New Terra, let this stand as proof that the murdered are never truly silenced, that justice delayed is not justice, that memory itself can be a weapon against tyranny. May we all remember, may we all learn, may we all build something better. Humanity had not forgotten its wound, but it had turned that wound into wisdom, and that wisdom had changed the galaxy forever.